afternoon and good evening or good morning, everyone who is here with us today, depending on where you are. And welcome to this exciting conversation. Let me first of all thank Patrick and the Ashesi University community for welcoming me to be a moderator for this event. My name is Peter Materu. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Mastercard Foundation, a partner of Ashesi University since the last 10 years. And I'm pleased that we have been invited to be part of this journey of Ashesi University. Before we get into the event of the day, allow me to say a few words about the Mastercard Foundation. We are a very young foundation, established in 2006 and registered in Toronto in Canada, with two charitable purposes. The first one, to promote education and learning for young people and children. And the second one, to advance financial inclusion for the poor. Since our establishment in 2006, we have primarily worked on Africa, prioritized working on Africa. But in 2018, we made a decision to double down on this commitment and focus almost all our work on Africa, and particularly on young people in Africa. We chose to focus on youth employment, but understood as the entire journey of a young person from education and learning through linkage to the labor market and doing things on the demand side to create more opportunities for young people so that young people can have a dignified life. And to do this, we also set ourselves an ambitious goal to be focused on this mission for the next 10 years and to enable 30 million young people, especially women, to access dignified work. And we said to achieve this, we have to work with African organizations. And so we set an ambitious target of 75% of all the organizations we work with and all the money that we commit to be to African organizations. And we also said that to achieve this, we need to be on the ground. So we changed our operating model 2.5 years ago from being a Canada-based organization to actually establishing a footprint on the ground in Africa. And that, as we speak now, we are in 7 countries in Africa, and more than 2/3 of our staff are based in Africa, including the senior management of the foundation, like myself. I'm based in Kigali. I'm happy to be part of this partnership with Ashesi University. Ashesi was one of our very first partners in the Scholars Program, a program we set up a little over 10 years ago to essentially focus on developing a new generation of young leaders in Africa who could be change makers in their communities and in their countries. We'll be celebrating the 10 years anniversary sometime this year. And I'm glad to know that this is also happening at the same time as Ashesi celebrates the 20th anniversary of the university. My journey has been one in higher education. I've always believed that higher education in Africa has a role that is bigger than producing graduates. It's about transforming socioeconomic conditions in the continent, and therefore developing those leaders and citizens that are going to champion this work. And so when I hear Patrick talking about the vision of Ashesi University, that is my vision. And I'm so glad today to be here among colleagues who believe in the same vision, colleagues from institutions that have seen the value of working in this way to change not only young people's lives, but also to create those leaders and citizens that are going to transform their countries. Now, when Patrick visited us about a little over 2.5 years ago to share the university collaborative idea, he said, I have been thinking about how to scale up Ashesi University. And I've come to the conclusion that building more campuses will not take us very far. I've got a different idea. It's about building a collaborative that is going to be based on the approach that we have chosen to take in Ashesi. And that is the fastest way and the most effective way of scaling up the Ashesi model. And that is really the essence of the collaborative. And we immediately throw ourselves behind that idea because we believe that that is something that is needed, is urgent, and we've seen the exemplar set by Ashesi University. So we work together and set an ambitious goal of over 100 institutions to be part of this collaborative, which is going to be about mentoring others, going to be about supporting each other, working together, learning from each other, and through that, impact young people, but also impact institutions and communities in our countries. I have no doubt that already with the results that have taken place so far, seeing people like Kadea here today, who has been under the mentorship of Ashesi University, no doubt that already thousands of young people have benefited from this. And the potential is even bigger if all of us come together and embrace this model. So I'm also glad to see that Ashesi is developing this benchmarking framework, which is another way to influence in a way that we can see many more institutions in the continent go beyond teaching and producing graduates to embracing ethical leadership, to embracing the problem-solving approach, to embracing building those soft skills and community focus that is so necessary to achieve the socio-economic transformation that we're talking about. Let me say that to conclude my introductory remarks, that the foundation is excited about this collaborative idea. We are fully committed to supporting this. And we are so honored to have been invited by Patrick and the other colleagues at Ashesi to be part of this journey. And let me also share with you that the Ashesi Collaborative has influenced us in the foundation already. And we have just recently supported the establishment of a similar collaborative in the health sector, inspired by the Ashesi Collaborative. So today, in this conversation, I look forward to really hearing from many, from the panelists here that we have, but also from colleagues in the audience on how best we can work together to take this further. And now, before we get started, let me invite the panelists we have here today to introduce themselves. And who else to start with but Patrick Aouar, the champion and founder of Ashesi University, the champion and founder of this collaborative. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's a real pleasure to join you today. I am the president of Ashesi University. I describe myself at the university as the person who knows a lot of great people working together to make the Ashesi vision real. So it's a real pleasure to join you today, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Patrick. Let's go to Rose.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Rose Dodd. I'm the director for the Education Collaborative. I'm also an Ashesi alumni from 2009 and faculty in entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Rose. George.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is George Mugabe, and I work as the Director of Research and Community Services at Kepler, based in Rwanda, Kigali, as well as I am also the Program Manager for the Ashesi Education Collaborative's Systems Change Program for Employability. And I look forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Look forward to seeing you in Kigali one of these days. Okay, and Kadea. Kadea, I still remember that first meeting we had in Kigali with Patrick. I'm so happy to see that it's moved this far. Kadea, please introduce yourself. Kadea, we can't hear you. Can others hear Kadea?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you. Yeah.
So I was saying bonjour tout le monde et bonsoir. I'm bringing some French in the conversation tonight.
Excellent.
So my name is Kader Kane, and I work at ADU in Niger, and very much inspired by the work of HSC University. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kader. Pleased to see you. And let me say that at ADU, African Development University, has just recently joined the network of scholars program institutions in the Mastercard Foundation, inspired by HSC University. So thank you, Kader, for the great work you're doing. That is our panel for this evening. Now, just want to recap the objectives. The objectives today are three. The first one is we would like to hear from this panel and also from colleagues who have had the opportunity to integrate with this panel, what the collaborative has been doing. What the collaborative has done so far. Yeah. The second objective is, and I'm sure you have this question in your mind, what do I do if I want to be part of this collaborative? We'll get to hear what you need to do to engage with this collaborative. And then the third objective is going to be hearing from those who are already part of this collaborative, sharing their experiences, how the collaborative is impacting their work in their institutions, but also in their countries, in their regions. So with that, let us get started. Later, we will have an opportunity for everyone in the audience or those in the audience who have questions to raise them. But if you do have a question as our panelists speak, please put them in the chat, and then at the end, we'll pick it up and try to respond to as many as possible. So to start with, I'm going to start back to you, Patrick. I'm going to ask you to just share with us a little bit on the journey that you've been on. You know, HSC championed the collaborative since 2017, laying the groundwork for the collaboration and working together with key stakeholders to grow the support of the program. What is it that informed HSC's decision?
Well, there are a couple of things that informed our decision to do the Education Collaborative. The first was just looking at the scale of what needs to be addressed on the continent, right? So looking at what is the scale that we need to grow education at here on the continent to make an effective change. And then the second, frankly, was a conversation I had with I had with multiple people. You know, a lot of people kept asking me, how do you scale the work that you're doing at HSC? And often this question came in the form of what can you do to actually build multiple campuses? We had government officials from a couple of African countries that had approached us and said, you know, consider setting up campuses in our country. And then finally, I had a conversation with Rita Roy, CEO of Mastercard Foundation. And she was in a workshop that I was attending, and she had given us a challenge. It's quite a simple challenge. You know, how would you scale your work by a factor of 10 or 100? Mm-hmm. This is a very specific question. It wasn't sort of this general, how do you scale your work? She was asking, how do you scale your work by an order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude? And once the question was framed that way, you know, I had to look at, okay, HSC at the time was maybe about 1,000 students. How do we scale our work to affect 100,000 students? This is a very big question. And it seemed to me, you know, as I pondered that question, that the answer was already before us. There's already a massive effort to scale education on the continent. There are a lot of universities starting. There are public universities that are growing their enrollments dramatically. And it seemed that if we could leverage that energy that is already there, that's already here on the continent, if we could leverage it and be very intentional about learning from each other, then we would actually achieve a scale beyond 2 orders of magnitude, right? So that's where the idea first came, is, you know, trying to address this question of scale and then recognizing that actually, if you really want to do scale, you want to leverage the strengths and the talents of others. And as I proposed it to my team, we also have these pillars we call the Ashesi Way: scholarship, leadership, and citizenship. And in the leadership pillar, one of the things that we have in there is a great leader leverages the strengths of others and adds to the strengths of others. In the scholarship bucket, we talk about proactively sharing our knowledge with others. And in the citizenship bucket, we talk about leaving a lasting institution and ethics and all of that. And well, the Education Collaborative does all of those things, would do all of those things. And so it completely fit with our mission. And that's how we decided to get this done. And we invited a few institutions to join us. And I think Rose can tell us more, but I think in the first year, we had maybe 10 institutions that attended the first workshop, and then it's grown from there.
Wonderful, wonderful, Patrick. Really, really ingenious. I really appreciate that. Rose, I'm going to come to you next. You have the responsibility to bring the vision to life. So can you share with us how the collaborative's work is being implemented across Africa?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter, for the question. Seeing as this is a very grand endeavor and vision, we started by, from 2017, between 2017 and 2020, engage in a certain core set of institutions, of course, beginning from Ashesi's own network of institutions, that we've engaged with. In 2017, as Patrick said, we had just about 10 institutions up to Ashesi University, and the conversation was around, is this something that institutions on the continent would be interested in engaging in? Are institutions willing to share, learn from each other, and mentor each other? What are those things that are holding us back in achieving that? And how deep can we go with these collaborations? So between 2017 and 2020, we learned a few things that played a very big part in determining how we model the Education Collaborative. Currently, we are engaging over 100 institutions annually in our programs, from when we started in 2017 with 10 institutions. So what we've done is build a very tightly affiliated, mutually accountable network of institutions that are operationalized through regional hubs in Sub-Saharan Africa. So this looks like 4 different regions across the continent, Sub-Saharan Africa in the continent, that are engaging closely with each other across the different regions, as well as within the regions, institutions are engaging. And what we do in the collaborative is develop a collective and focused agenda that you would say engages all of the institutions to be working toward one goal. This goal being to increase ethical entrepreneurial graduates that have the skill, knowledge, and character to be good citizens and to lead institutions and economies in Africa. So this really gets to the heart of some of the very key areas that are important or critical to economic development. So areas being ethics and leadership, entrepreneurship, pedagogy, research, and employability. So the Education Collaborative institutions as it stands engage in different programmatic areas, which we call focal areas. And these focal areas are multi-year projects that multiple institutions work around. And through the development of these focal initiatives, we are building, you could say, best practices, right? That are benchmarks that essentially provide evidence, right, to support effective reforms. So our ultimate goal is that as a collective or as a group of institutions in a collaborative, we would be able to implement some of the best practices in higher education, teaching and learning, so that we can collect enough evidence through implementation to support effective reforms across the higher education sector as a whole. Our goal is to engage 140 member institutions. Now, that might seem really small considering that there's over 1,500 universities and higher education institutions on the continent. But what we've learned is that if you get a very core set of higher education institutions completely committed to this agenda and this goal, and working together, not compromising on quality, and ensuring excellence throughout, learning, teaching, university management, pedagogy, this set of institutions can mentor each other, mentor other institutions on the continent, and develop tools, practices that can be shared, right, through regulatory reform and policy reform, then eventually over the course of 10, 20 years, impact the entire higher education sector on the continent. An example is our work in employability, right? So I think that gives a clear example of how institutions are working together. Under employability, we have a key focal initiative called the Systems Change Program in employability. That is saying that institutions need to take a more systemic approach, learning from higher education institutions on the continent that have shown very good outcomes and impact in student employability. How did they approach it? And with that, building a program that engages universities and other colleges of education even to build their own employability systems, as part of this initiative. And I think George would talk a bit more about that initiative. That gives us the opportunity for institutions that are joining the network, either as part of the network or as part of the membership base of the network, to build systems in employability, or with all of us working towards one agenda over 10 years. I think George and Kader will speak a bit more about that also.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rose. Can you say a few words about the development of those hubs? How far are we right now? That might be of interest. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So far we have developed the East Africa Hub. We began setting up the East Africa Hub in 2021. So we are just 1 year in. And currently there's 10 member institutions in the East Africa Hub. And we are engaging over 20 other institutions in the hub within the network. There are going to be 4 regional hubs in East Africa, West Africa, Francophone Africa, and Southern Africa. Mm-hmm. North Africa institutions do engage in the Education Collaborative as part of the open network. However, there's no administrative hub office in North Africa.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rose. I just wanted to add that piece. I'm going to come to you, Kader, next. Kader, first of all, thank you for the hard work you are doing in a region that has many needs in this space, and a tough one, and for your courage to get started. Niger is considered to have one of the fastest growing youth populations in the world. And to tap into this dynamic and grow productivity, your university, the African Development University, has committed itself to working in this space, committing yourself to growing productivity, to addressing the challenges that young people face in the Sahel, and taking entrepreneurship, skill and job creation as a key goal of the work of the university. Can you speak to how the Education Collaborative is helping you bring this outcome to students at the African Development University?
Sure. Thank you again, Peter. And Welcome to our public, to people who join in the meantime. Yeah, just before zooming in on the education on entrepreneurship part, I have to say the whole adventure of ADU was made, I want to say possible, but more like was made accelerated thanks to the work that we did with the Education Collaborative. It went really way beyond specific aspects like the entrepreneurship. It's more like the operation in themselves, the academic part, the non-academic part, the strategic part. I think Rose was there almost at every time, every step. And the beauty of the whole thing was that it was in a co-creation mode where HEC knew the way to go, and we knew how the Sahel worked and what was the local context. So when you put together expertise and knowledge of local context, it just becomes a, you know, like fireworks. That's how the whole ADU adventure is moving like much faster than we ever imagined when we were in the planning phases. So coming down to the entrepreneurship part, actually, when you land in Niger at the airport and you ask where are the entrepreneurs built in Niger, you'll probably hear people say ADU. We really managed to position ADU as the place for entrepreneurship, where our students are known as entrepreneurs. They compete in national competitions, they win and they fail. And people know them. People, when students have ideas, they want to start something and they want to study at the same time, usually they will choose ADU because they know that this is the place. And we've been pushing entrepreneurship in a very chaotic way, where we just curated content, you know, from these big universities in the world, and try to use it as out-of-class activities and connect the students to mentors as we are connected in the environment. And we started discussing with HEC at some point when we put the foundations of the university clear. We started discussing how do we put entrepreneurship at the center, since people know us for that. So we had an innovation lab, the ILIMI Innovation Lab, and then we started working with Rose, who then called in the conversation Impact Hub Ghana. Then we started thinking together, how do we strategize about bringing the entrepreneurship at the center at ADU? How do we implement that? How do we think of a sustainability plan, including funding? And I think the most beautiful thing for me came from the fact that we looked at entrepreneurship as something students do as a non-academic activity out of the classroom. And working with the HEC Collaborative and Impact Hub Ghana, we brought it within the curriculum as part of the normal way of learning, and not like a side activity such as a club or sports of arts and something. And the students just love that. Like this year, I think we were at 60% at the last time that we checked of students who formally want to become entrepreneurs rather than looking for a job. So for me, like, this is the best thing that happened to us. We wanted to do something. We had the vision. We started to do something in a chaotic way somehow. And then engaging with the HEC Collaborative, we found a way to structure this and to make it work so much more better, so much more. So we're not even finished with everything I was explaining about the strategy, but already I think the first round of funding for our student entrepreneurs came from the HEC Collaborative. So we were having these incredible young people doing beautiful things. Seriously, we will not have time for me to showcase what they are doing, but some of them are hiring more than 20 people in full time. Some of them are just recreating lost craftsmanship, traditional craftsmanship that disappeared from the country, and they're bringing it back to life with technology and so on and so forth. So it's working. And I think it's working thanks to the discipline and the structure that Rose and her team brought to us. So that's how we're doing it. There's another component on career service, but since careers are not really our focus, but entrepreneurship is, I will stop here and hand it over to you, Peter. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Kader. I have to work hard to find another university where 60% of the students want to become entrepreneurs and not go out and search for jobs out there. This is wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that. George, I'm going to come to you next. So, Dr. George Mugabe, you are currently involved in a system change program with the Education Collaborative and the Education Sub-Saharan Africa to help universities design or deepen career support programs and services at Kepler University. And Kepler itself has had much success in this area. So can you speak to how the collaborative is piloting this program and how you hope to extend the learnings to other institutions across the continent? George, over to you.
Thank you so much, Fisa. I hope you can hear me. So before I can delve into the question, I would like to highlight our mission here at Kepler, particularly in preparing the young African youths for the future work with 21st century skills through different pathways, aligns very well with what, for example, what Patrick was talking about in terms of what needs to be done in terms of meeting the demands of what, for example, the employment market asks of us, higher ed institutions, particularly in equipping them with those skills that are needed. Now, this actually calls to the attention of why initiatives like these are actually important, particularly in transforming the way we collaborate at higher ed institutions in Africa, where we have seen our institutions, being disintegrated in terms of how they collaborate with each other. So the systems change program for employability, as you rightfully said earlier, aiming to support different institutions to scale up their employment outcomes in higher learning institutions. How the system has actually been programmed is in form of being dynamic as well as adaptive in nature. And our pilot cycle is already underway. We launched it last November. And for this pilot cycle, we have 3 institutions that are participating as recipients to the program itself. Someone may actually look at them as mentee, but within the program, we like to call them participating institutions, being represented by leads. And these institutions are University of Cape Coast in Ghana, and we also have Rwanda Polytechnic here in Rwanda, as well as Burkina Institute of Technology that is based in Burkina Faso, that have been paired with what we like to call within the program itself as exemplar institutions, as mentors. And these institutions includes Ashesi, and we also have Strathmore University in Kenya, as well as we also have Kepler here in Rwanda. And all that we are doing within the program is we pair these institutions to work on a daily basis with mentors in terms of designing strategies as well as systems in order to transform both structurally as well as operational wise in terms of how, let's say, career service systems or career service programs can actually be implemented or institutionalized within those particular institutions in order to scale up employment outcomes. So while we see that we have these other 6 institutions working together, the program in itself, we also have the Education Collaborative as the main lead of the program. And we also have other partnering institutions, including Kepler, that takes on the role of the implementer or the program runners, as well as we also have the Education Sub-Saharan Africa, or ESSA, that is helping us to capture data. So in terms of the role of research and knowledge capturing. So we believe that in order for us to be able to own the narrative, as well as strategize around the agenda of transforming the education systems in Africa, we need to have data that will inform our decisions and also will help us influence policy changes with real data that actually speaks to what works and what doesn't work, in order to find ways in order of improving them. So while understanding, and to come to your question, the importance of sharing best practices, especially in terms of triggering the paradigm shifts and on how higher learning institutions across Africa can collaborate with each other and share best practices, the Systems Change Program for Employability hopes to scale up its outcomes for the next 10 years through different initiatives and through different approaches. One being providing an enabling environment through our community of practices that are more targeted. For example, we already have programmatic thematic areas that we focus on, including research, employability, as well as ethics and leadership. All these community of practices help to provide that enabling environment where we have both participating institutions within the program being able to come there and freely share some of those best practices of what works. And since these community of practices will be hosting also some institutions that are non-participating institutions within the program itself, then we'll be able to share those best practices there, and as well as learn on some other things that we may have not been able to capture them. So ideally, what we are hoping to see here is in the next 5 to 10 years, we should be able, through these collaborative approaches, where we have something that we can call as a playbook, in terms of if we want to influence policy, then it becomes easy for the Education Collaborative through real data in terms of what works and what doesn't work. Then we can actually sit with different policymakers and actually be able to have those productive discussions in terms of really pushing for that transformation that we are all looking for. And I know sometimes, I think you can, as you heard from Patrick, as well as Rose, and I think also Peter, you mentioned it's a big dream. And sometimes even when you have discussions with different people, you may not be surprised to hear when someone tells you, actually, this is too big, and it's quite hard to envision it being done. But if you permit me to quote what Patrick mentioned, yes, our problems are big. Hence, it is through these small collaborative efforts that those little things that we'll be able to achieve, then collectively, if we put them together, we should be able to come up with something great that will actually bring about the changes that we are looking for. So in the spirit of allowing more space for us to engage, I would ask you to permit me to stop here, and probably we can hear from others. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much, George. Yes, if you don't get started, you never get anywhere. And if you don't dream, then you have not really tested the limits of your ambition. So absolutely, fully agree. I'm going to come back to you, Rose, with one more question, and Patrick as well, before going to the other participants. Rose, you shared with us a little bit about how you are bringing the vision to life. Now, for the participants who are here and stakeholders, what are the ways in which one may participate in or support the efforts of the Education Collaborative?
All right, thank you so much, Peter. So as you heard from the very different but unique examples that unique examples shared by Kader and George, there's multiple ways by which institutions can engage, right? So the Education Collaborative, because of the similarities of context, right, of institutions on the African continent, we engage mostly African universities or universities on the African continent. Actually, I should say institutions at the tertiary level, because it's not just universities. There are colleges, there are training institutions, technical colleges, TVET institutions on the African continent. However, Education Collaborative also engages with other institutions outside of the continent, right, in supporting learning, in working through coming up with new innovations or new approaches to improving our impact and outcomes. Institutions can participate. So if you're an institution, or if you're maybe in the higher education sector, you can support by participating in our programs and initiatives. And that's one very easy and very quick way, to join the Education Collaborative Network. Through our website, you can find our key initiatives, focal initiatives, as well as our annual events events and programs that we organize. And you can join those platforms to share insights, form small project groups, join communities of practice, and take part in the Education Collaborative Network. But as an institution, you might also explore a deeper engagement or a deeper commitment within the Education Collaborative and join the network as a member institution. Of course, that requires, as I said, deeper engagement, and it's more institutional. And this will allow you to support really actively developing the Education Collaborative's work, goals and priorities within and through the regional hubs. For donors and foundations that are supporting African higher education, you can fund some of these key initiatives that we described, something like the Systems Change Program in Employability, or the entrepreneurship programs in helping institutions really take a look at their internal entrepreneurship ecosystems and then building them out. You could also support by contributing to the long-term sustainability and growth of the Education Collaborative itself, right? Through direct partnerships with us. For institutions, so I think institutions will generally fall within one or both of these two categories. And if you're a higher education institution outside of the continent of Africa, you can still engage very deeply in the programs and initiatives in the Education Collaborative. I hope this answers, Peter.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Rose. There is a question in the Q&A, which is asking about what are those specific priorities of institutions that are participating here. So later on, I'll come back to you to talk a little bit about that if you have the answer, but it's a good question. Let me go to Patrick. Patrick, I understand that the Education Collaborative is also working to create an Africa-focused, and I want to underline Africa-focused ranking system. I would call it, some people would call it a benchmarking system. What is the vision for how this will strengthen higher education in Africa? And maybe you could talk a little bit about where we are with that process as well. Over to you, Patrick.
Okay, sure. So let me just start by actually take a step back and talk about something that inspired us to do this. So on the one hand, we're engaging very deeply with each other as institutions on the continent to improve outcomes for our students and through them improve the trajectory of the African continent. But on the other hand, we also need to be intentional about how we measure our progress, how we measure whether we're on the right path or not. And there's something that is in the world today, which we look to for inspiration. When I was a young person growing up in Ghana, starting a business here I knew was very, very difficult. In fact, doing anything with the government bureaucracy, with just about anything, took months to do. And then the World Bank developed an ease of doing business index, which has made a tremendous difference in how businesses function in many different countries. And the thing about the ease of doing business index was that it identified either 10 very specific things that they measure, right? So they measure, the processes and the cost of starting a business. They measure how to get construction permit, how to get electricity, how to get credit, enforcement of contracts, and so on. And these 10 measures then served as, very clear goals that countries could pursue, making sure that people have the ability to get credit, making sure that you have an investor-friendly environment, making sure that starting a business isn't going to take months, but it was really going to take hours or days. Mm-hmm. So they developed this index that categorized countries as very easy to easy to difficult, and they also ranked them numerically. Which country is the easiest and which one is number 190 on the list. But the important thing about that index, I would say, was the rubric that they developed that governments could then use to improve their environment in their countries. And that's what we're trying to do here as well. So we want to develop a rubric that gathers data on a regular basis and publishes it in a very transparent way so that we can measure ourselves, see how we're doing, measure how we're doing relative to our peers. And through that, improve performance over time. Now, the approach that we've taken was to, you called it the Education Collaborative Ranking for Africa, but it's not an Education Collaborative Ranking. We're just sort of catalyzing it. But we engaged 4 organizations to help us put this together. So it's not coming out of Ashesi. It's a organization, Botho, Maverick, MICOS, and Times Higher Ed are working together to establish something for the African continent. And as you well know, Times Higher Ed has done a number of rankings in the world. There's a World University Research Ranking, there's an Impact Ranking, there's a Middle East Ranking, and so on. So they bring some experience that we value as well. But what Botho and Maverick and MICOS do is they come with sort of this knowledge of the context in Africa. Now, beyond what the 4 institutions bring, the knowledge that they bring, we decided to just go out and ask Africans and different publics what we should be measuring. So, of course, we went to university professors and so on to get their views. But one very interesting group that we went to was students. We did a survey of over 1,000 students from Ghana, Kenya, and Zimbabwe, so West, East, and Southern Africa, and asked them a couple of very simple questions, right? One question was, what are the things that, in your opinion, are holding Africa back? And the second was, given that set of things, what should universities be doing so that we can do better as a continent? It's 2 very simple questions, right? Basically measuring what are the gaps, what should we be measuring that we're not already measuring, what should we be doing that we're not already doing or not doing well enough. And it was very interesting to see from the 3 groups, from Ghana, Kenya, Zimbabwe, the consistency of their views of what matters, right? So they all talked about employability. They all talked about corruption as a problem. They all talked about the need for more innovation and for universities to be working and doing research in a way that drives innovation. And So when the students talked about then what universities should do, they had a very simple list. We should pay attention to employability. We should pay attention to community impact. We should pay attention to the quality of teaching, campus infrastructure and the quality of student life, equity, the financial health of institutions, governance and management, and anti-corruption, right? And it was really interesting to see students come up with this list. Some of it I wasn't surprised by. You know, I fully expected the employability and corruption, for example. But I was a bit surprised that students were talking about the financial health of their alma mater. So you expect maybe vice chancellors to talk about that. It was interesting that students notice and they know that if their university's financial health is low, then outcomes for them would be also low. It was interesting to see so many of them talk about campus infrastructure. So anyway, Peter, where we are is we're taking all this data from students, from parents, from corporate Africa, from academia, and coming up with a rubric that will be similar to the rubric that the Ease of Doing Business Index does. And then we will start measuring. Now, some of the things that we will need to measure will require us to do things that university rankings have not done on the continent in the past. So for example, you know, rankings will often go get data from the university's quantitative data, you know, student faculty ratios, for example, or a percentage of faculty who are publishing, etc. But they don't usually do surveys of students or surveys of alumni. And looking at the kinds of things that the various publics that we've talked with are telling us are important, this new ranking is going to have to do some extra heavy lifting to get the data we need. But it's good that we're identifying that we need to get this data. So universities are, for example, going to realize that in order to participate effectively in this ranking, they need to have an alumni office that actually is connected to alumni, that can give contact information for their alumni so that these surveys can be done. But as they build up that infrastructure internally, it's also going to help the universities in other ways, like their financial health, as they're more connected with alumni and are able to get alumni giving and so on. So we're very excited about this because I think that it's a really good complement to the work that the Education Collaborative is doing, where we're learning from each other. But there's this whole question of measurement and evaluation. And how do we do that measurement in a very long-term sustainable way? And it seems that doing an index of how universities are you know, operating and what the outcomes are would serve us in good stead over the next decades. We are close to having the rubric ready, and the goal is to do a first pilot and have the first version of the index published by the end of this year or early next year. And then we will iterate from there. And one of the things that we're also probably going to do is, you know, as we've done these surveys, we actually have data like what percentage of students think employability is the top issue? What percentage think corruption, anti-corruption is the big issue? And those percentages can actually serve as weightings for the ranking. So we're basically going to Africa and Africans and asking them, what should we be measuring? How much weight should we give to the different things that we measure? And then we're going to publish the results for everybody to see. And very importantly, publish results that we as higher ed institutions can use to measure ourselves and improve our work in the years to come.
Oh, Patrick, thank you very much. It's something that my journey of higher education has always been needed. The only question has been, how do we develop one that is Africa focused, that takes into account the things that matter for socioeconomic transformation in Africa. And I'm so thankful to you and the other members of the collaborative for stepping into this space. What is measured gets to be managed. So it's absolutely needed. And I hope we can work together to make this happen. Great. Now we've finished the first part of this conversation with our panelists, and we're going to now open up the conversation to the broader list of participants. We have a few questions that have come up in the chat, and we have some questions, few questions around the question of employability. Eben, if you could read them out, please, when we get to that. There are questions. There's one question on the hub, and then the hubs, and where are they, and how do people engage? I'm in Kenya. How do I engage the East African hub? So this is for you, Rose. And there's a question about strategies for improving employability. Again, this is Kadea and George. If you could speak to that a little bit. There is a question for Barbara about how to partner between this initiative and the historically Black universities in the US. Patrick, this will be for you to respond to. But let me start with Rose. Talk a little bit about the hubs. How do people engage with the hubs? And then we'll go to the employability question. And Patrick, I'll come to you last with the HBCU partnership, and maybe there are such other networks of like-minded institutions. So over to you, Rose.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So the regional hubs are set up to allow institutions that share a similar regulatory system, right? And most likely, similar challenges in higher education, right? To work together to prioritize and implement the Education Collaborative strategy for that region. So the hub is essentially a coming together of universities, in that region. It's governed by a regional hub committee that is made up of university heads and a technical committee from same universities that really look at, okay, this is the Education Collaborative strategy. This is what we are trying to achieve under employability, entrepreneurship, ethics and leadership. What do we need in East Africa to prioritize? And how do we implement this across our institutions in a way as to, track, measure, and share the learnings and impact that is made? So is really what the hub is about. Because one of the things we learned really is that Africa, though, it's one continent, is very diverse, even in, across the different regions. I mean, within countries, but even within the regions also. When you join the Education Collaborative Network as an institution from East Africa, you can automatically sign up for the East Africa Hub. What we do is we then introduce you to the East Africa Hub committee, and you join the East Africa Hub, right? So it's so long as you are on the continent and you are within the boundaries of a certain region, you are counted as part of that hub. And the committee of university leaders in that hub will then engage your institution as part of that regional hub. So the first step is to join the network of Education Collaborative through our website or by sending an email.
Thank you very much, Rose. So if the one who raised the question, I think it was Titus, if you have additional questions, please get in touch with Rose. I'm sure she will be able to give you more information. Kadea, let me get to you on the question around strategies for improving employability. And George, please add after Kadea if you would like to add. Kadea, over to you.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah. Would you like to read the question, or are you fine with it?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to share our approach, which is really very, very simple and down to reality of the environment. So basically, The way it works here is that we have some type of curricula that are already preset, and they are from a very long time in the past. And mostly when people build their schools, that's what they take, they replicate, they bring it to the ministry, and they have their agreement to start. So when it comes to employability, I feel like there's an iconoclast approach to have at some level. And the way we did it was to say we don't want to use the templates. Some are really colonial templates, you know. And we went to the Chamber of Commerce and discussed with them and the corporate Niger to ask them what do they want to see in the people they want to hire. If we are to create a world-class university and we want them to hire all our students, what do they want to see in them? And we work like that with them in different sessions for the people who kept coming. And what we learned as number one request from the private sector was that they wanted people who on whose back they don't need to be. Donc, basically, ils ont dit, on ne veut pas être derrière eux tout le temps. Like they feel like there are people who are qualified, they know how to do the work. As long as you are supervising them, they will do it. But the moment you turn your back, they will drop it all. So they needed some type of autonomy. And then we discussed with the NGO sector. In Niger, NGO sector is really big. Actually, it creates more jobs than the private sector. And they have much higher salaries, so people love working for them. So we engage with them, and what we learned from their needs, the biggest need that they expressed was people who are able to write, to do like professional reports. So like they work a lot, they need to tell stories, they need to capture their impact. And they say it's so difficult. They have master students, even in French language, but and they also needed people who speak English, but what they needed most was people who can write really professionally. And so they won't waste time on that. And of course, we discussed with the public sector and asked them what they want to see. And interestingly enough, they didn't know what they wanted to have as people. So we knew that for some people, we need to create people for their needs. And so from other people, you need to create the needs for them. You need to define it for them because they don't know or they don't care. So like for me, that's where it starts. It's like we have to understand that we, the universities, are not the ones who know. We're not the end user of the product. So if the student is the product, the client is the end. We solve for the system, for the end users making the system, and we have to, in a sort of design thinking approach, we have to understand their critical need, and then define our curriculum to solve that need. So, for instance, that's why in our approach we put a lot of self and peer learning, because we want people to be able to work together without the power of the teacher who scares them, like usually. So I feel like that's what works the best. Then you couple it with a career center, a career preparation, where they learn now how to do interviews and so on and so forth. So for instance, at ADU, we have a professional week where we change the work hours to align them with corporate Niger. And we ask them to come in dress code, and the whole week the school operates as a business. It's not your typical coming to school, so that they immerse themselves in the environment. But I think if we don't do the first part, even if you have a career service support, it will not be enough. We really need to forget the curricula, because it's the way it used to be. And sometimes, because it's the only way to get accredited, but you have to sometimes choose if you want the accreditation or you really want to make a difference in the environment. So in our case, accreditation was a challenge at the beginning because of that. But when they started to see that our students were good, different, we ended up having the accreditation like 3 years later, but we still got it while we kept our way of doing things. Well, we had to change some of the things, but we found a good balance. So that will be my that would be my 2 cents for that question. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Kadea. Thank you, George. Want to add a few words to that? Then Patrick, I'm coming to you next.
Yes, Peter. Thank you again for the opportunity. And I think Kadel just highlighted the most critical parts. I would like to speak from a different perspective, and I would like to highlight, for example, what we are doing within the Systems Change Program. You know, Africa, I think Rose said it better. Africa is quite unique in itself. It's so diverse, and in that, by default, we cannot say one strategy fits all. And as Kadel just mentioned now, that for them, this is what works. So within the Systems Change Program for employability, what we try to do, or what we are trying to do, is we bring in institutions that, for example, from the person who posed the question, what are the strategies for employability, for example? So these recipients who are participating institutions who come within the program, we pair them with other institutions that have, to some extent, had really good outcomes in terms of graduate employment. And what we do is we bring them together, we take them through different workshops and trainings to understand the philosophy around the principles of systems change in itself. And then the big question there is to ask, what are your needs? And I think Kadel highlighted this. For them, their needs was A, B, C, D. So here what we say is, we are not saying that we know everything, but come, let us sit down, help you think. And then from that thought process, you identify what you need. And by looking at what your mentors are already doing through their different strategies and programs that they already have, it becomes easy for you to now start doing, backward design, by contextualizing what you are facing. Because institutions here in Rwanda and institutions in Ghana or anywhere else, their realities, however similar may be, there is always that difference. So if we say we continue with the copy-paste philosophy of these strategies, which, sadly, most institutions here in Africa, we have always been doing that. We take something and then we copy, and then outcomes remain to be the same, meaning being poor. The Systems Change Program wants to try to transform that. And by contextualizing, what we also say is, normally in Africa, we already know that we lack resources, in this sense, financial resources. Now, the Education Collaborative pushes it further by saying, hey, we want to support you. We support you through this thought process. And then while you are thinking, we can also say, we are also saying that take that idea and then pilot it, and let's see what are those outcomes. And while we do that, we continue to collect and capture data that now comes again to feed into how we can scale it up. And if the outcomes are better, or if outcomes are significant and positive, then we actually say, okay, it's also our responsibility to take this and share with other institutions. So for me, the answer is, yes, there can be strategies, and we have a lot of them, but I would not like to encourage saying, okay, let's just sit and then say, okay, we only have one strategy and this can apply everywhere. However, what we should be doing is, why not discuss, identify first, what is your need? My need today may be different from yours, because where we are starting, some start at 0, some start at 10. Then from there, we see how we can help each other through sharing of best practices and contextualizing what I have on, to your institution, and see how it works, and then we learn from there. So that's pretty much the crazy process we normally go back and forth trying to figure out how we can progress. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Yeah, no cookie cutter solutions, no copy and paste.
Yes.
Contextualize, test it out, learn together, refine, improve, and do it again, then do it better. It's a journey. I get it. Patrick, I'm going to come to you next. And there are two questions in the chat which are related. One is asking a broader question around how can this approach of collaborative be taken to other sectors? And a macro part of that is, how can this be tailored to engage with other institutions like the historically Black universities, which are in another context, but which have had some similar challenges? Over to you, Patrick.
Right. So thanks for the questions, Peter. So I would say that one of the things that we've done with the Education Collaborative is start from a premise of we want to build a community of practice of institutions that are self-reinforcing each other, right? And it's really important to start with sort of that openness to working with one's peers. Mm-hmm. And we've also taken the approach of saying that on the one hand, this question is about scale, and we want to get as many institutions as possible into the network as we can. We've set some benchmarks for the first 10 years, but we're also trying to identify, a smaller group, sort of a core 20 institutions that are really sort of exemplars, extra engaged, really driven, because it's often helpful to have a smaller group that is so committed that they sort of lend their energies to others. And so we've not taken the approach of saying it's all institutions are part of it, but we've also not taken the approach that only the following 10 institutions are part of it. We're actually saying, look, we want this thing to grow as large as it can, and take on a life of its own. We're also taking the approach of, in some cases, assisting other institutions where they've asked for that assistance, and where we can be a facilitator in helping them figure out their processes, their strategies, and even their funding. This is something that I think some institutions have found a bit unusual, that a Shesi university would raise funding to help another institution when we have our own funding needs, right? But again, it's sort of this commitment that we're all in this together, and we're going to work together and help each other as much as we can. And other institutions will pass it forward, right? Now, with the question about the HBCUs, I want to address it in two ways. One is, at Shesi University, in addition to our engagement with other African universities, we're also engaged with universities from outside of Africa. We have student exchange programs. We're part of networks where faculty are plugged into their peers outside of Africa in working together on research and so on. And we do that because we believe that we will be our best selves when we can learn as much as we can from others and adapt what works for us to our context. So in that regard, we're very open to connecting with HBCUs. I think we have exchange arrangements with over 10 universities in North America, the US and Canada, and as well as Europe. And absolutely being connected with HBCUs would be great. And we encourage people to reach out to help us, and people to help us make those connections. In the context of the Education Collaborative, I think one of the things that would be very interesting to us would be to learn from the HBCUs how they've connected with each other. What are the things that they've done in the past that have worked? What are the things that have not worked? And what might we learn from them as we're structuring our own network on the African continent? As Rose mentioned, we also have as part of the workshops that we do in the collaborative, we often have academics, university leaders from other parts of the world who come and participate in those workshops with us. And again, we would very much welcome HBCUs working with us in that regard.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Looks like lots of questions are coming, and we are almost running out of time, but this is exciting, isn't it? That's a question here, which from Vincent, which I would like to have us look at a little bit. Vincent has a three-part question. He's saying, okay, one is how can we involve the diaspora? But there are two other parts which are interesting. What has been the response of employers, the corporate, and what has been the response of governments to what we're trying to do here? Be it about improving employability or developing ethical leaders and so on. What experience do we have? And perhaps this is something for you, Patrick, and then Kader and George, who are in the actual doing. Who wants to start? Maybe I start with you, Kader. What has been the response of corporate and government?
Say again, sorry. What has been the response of
corporate and of government to what we are trying to do here under the collaborative?
I think corporate had a very, very good reaction. Actually, corporate loves our people, our students, and even when we gather together, we try to replicate the education collaborative in the previous 2 years. So it will be happening. I think it happened online, and Niger had less restrictions in COVID, so we will do it on the ground, but streaming what was happening in Ghana. And every time we bring the corporate world to come see what we are doing, they have a very good reaction to that. I think thanks to the liking of our students when they go for the internships and now for the jobs. Governments, it's like a love-hate relationship. Sometimes they are here. I think at the very top level, we have support. Like when we explain to the president of Niger or the former president, or what they just love what we're trying to achieve, bringing people together, bringing what is the best of what's happening in the world and bringing it in the desert. They love it. But when you come a little bit lower, then it becomes problematic. So it's still government for me, and I think, yeah, we have more work to do in terms of bringing them to support fully what is happening. I think they maybe they don't see the same way the top leaders see. And because we also don't take the time to explain to them, it's rather like, trust me, I'm working, I don't have time to convince you, but I know that it will work. Yeah. So sometimes they take time to get on board. Can I put it that way?
Thank you, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I've learned from my colleagues who are helping us coordinate this event that we have actually burnt our time. So what we're going to do is to do a round of a minute each through the panel for you to give your last reflections. And I'm going to try and go in the reverse order here. So Kader, I'll assume you have said your last word, but if you want to add a word, I'll let you do that. But I'll start with George, 1 minute, then I'll come to Kader, and then Rose, and finally, Patrick, I'll close with you. So George.
Thank you, Peter. Just a quick, for me, I know the last question was also something that I was going to address. In terms of the uptake, I would like to categorize it as progressive. Of course, there is more work that needs to be done. And so far, however, the corporate has actually been quite quick in terms of jumping on board, and this is evident through our annual convenings that we normally have through the Education Collaborative. And moving forward, I've always been a believer of collaborations because for me, it's the only way that we can learn and sustainably progress. And through these different initiatives that we have, the outlook is quite promising, and I'm looking forward to what lies ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Kader?
Sure. For me, it will be a call. I really want to strongly encourage. Rose is too humble to do that, but I would like to strongly encourage anyone who's listening to us or who will listen to the recording later to join the Education Collaborative. It's a total game changer, and you can trust me as the self-declared best student of the Education Collaborative, EDU. So that's the call for action here.
Thank you, and I can attest to that. All right, let's go to Rose.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Kader. So to close, I would just say two things. One, it's a comment on the government engagement, public sector government engagement. Is it takes time, right? The government is it's an agency that is overlooking several different aspects of economic development, right? So it takes time to cause change, right, in that space, and it takes evidence of impact, right, to bring that change about that change. So far we have engaged very well with government agencies in higher education across the different regions, annual convenings, and also in different symposium over the last 5 or so years. Also, I think there was a question on financial investment that I thought I would briefly touch on as well. So the question was, what is the financial investment needed to achieve this grand vision, right? So we currently expect to deploy about $30 million over the next decade, supporting the Education Collaborative Network. Half of this funding has been committed by the MasterCard Foundation so far. And Ashesi University Foundation, MasterCard Foundation, and Ashesi, we welcome partners who may be keen on financial investments also. So if you reach out directly to us, we can, we'll be very happy to work together to make this happen. And funding really helps institutions to take that first step to, you could say, pilot, a new model, a new initiative, a new approach that gives them that evidence of impact and outcomes on which to get more funding and further funding, right, to even grow their outcomes and the impact. So that would be my last word. And to just hammer on what Kader said, this June, on June 13th to 17th, we have our annual convening. And it's another very good platform to learn more about the Education Collaborative Network and to join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rose. And finally, you, Patrick.
Well, I think that the comments that the panelists have made so far have been exactly on point. The only thing that I would add to that perhaps is just to say that for me, the Education Collaborative is a lot about, the saying that we've all heard, that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And what we're trying to do with the Education Collaborative is to go fast and go further. We want to go fast, we want to go far. And what we've seen so far and what's happening with institutions that are members of the Education Collaborative is that there's real promise here. There's real change happening already. And I was blown away earlier this year when we sort of gathered the data and recognized that over 116,000 students on the continent have been directly affected by the Education Collaborative thus far. And it's just the first indication of what can be achieved when we go together. So my final words to everyone who's here in this meeting and those who will watch a recording is, let's go together and let's be masters of our own destiny.
Oh, thank you very much, Patrick. I like that. Go fast and go far. This is the collaborative. Well, thank you very much, Patrick. Let me also add my note of thanks to everyone here for the excellent conversation, and to thank Patrick and the Ashesi community in particular, and the collaborative members for inviting me to be part of this conversation and to moderate this conversation. Lots of great ideas and sharing here, which is really the spirit of the collaborative. So I think we have all been living through the collaborative in this 70 or 80 minutes that we've been here. I want to join Kadea in making a call, join the collaborative, and be part of this movement for socio-economic transformation in the continent, transforming higher education for that purpose. I just want to repeat what I said at the beginning. The Mastercard Foundation stays committed, and we are really excited by the initial results of this collaborative. And we are committed to continuing to accompany Ashesi and the collaborative in this journey of transformation, and looking forward to working together and learning together as we go over this journey. Just want to also say that, as I said in the course of my introductory remarks, this collaborative has inspired us to throw ourselves behind university collaboratives in other sectors. And as I mentioned, there is one already in the health sector, which is up and running, early stages. And there is a few conversations going on about other areas as well. I saw a question about climate change, or what more people are calling climate action, as an opportunity for Africa rather than a problem for Africa. This is another area where a lot of thinking is going, and I see a great role for universities to play, and potential for yet some more work to be done together here. And well, we apologize that we've not been able to answer every question and to hear from everybody. But please, if you've got any questions or you need more information, reach out to Rose, reach out to Patrick, reach out to Kadea, reach out to George, and other members of the collaborative who may not be here, so that together we can make this a great force for transformation in the continent. So thank you, everyone, and you have a good afternoon, great evening, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Thank you.